We believe that videos, images, words, and sounds have the absolute power to inform, inspire, and entertain. We reject indecision, confusion, and vanity, for they work against the community. We are united under the virtues of safety and knowledge. We are a training community of learners and teachers who encourage and energize each other to achieve greatness. We are pilots, videographers, photographers, freelancers, business owners, enthusiasts, experts, and apprentices. We are creators. We are the Drone U.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Ask Drone U. My name is Rob. Oh wait, Paul's not here today. What am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I'm just going to introduce Paul and Jon Rupprecht, our attorney extraordinaire. Paul spent a little bit of time with Jon on an interview just the other day, and we thought we'd bring that to you today, particularly because Paul is traveling. He just had a big weekend. I'll let him tell you about that. But nonetheless, it was a big weekend, and so we're going to play this interview for you. Good stuff. As usual, when we have Jon on, as usual, we appreciate Jon. He spends a lot of time with us, keeping us updated, which allows us to keep you guys updated, and that's a good thing. So they talked about a few things here, the 107, obviously, and Jon gives a bit of an update on that and kind of where things are with that, what some of the roadblocks might be. What's the likelihood of that actually coming out anytime soon? So they talk a little bit about that, as well as Jon was at AUVSI, and he spent some time talking to people, looking things over, and he's going to give you an update on what happened there, which is good stuff. And maybe the most exciting thing they're going to talk about is the Taylor case, at least from our perspective, because that's just got such ramifications that will ripple throughout the industry whenever that is completed. So he's going to talk about where they're at on that, which is more good information for you guys. So we're taking a break from our regular questions, our regularly scheduled programming, but don't let that stop you from sending in your questions. Please get them in. We love them. We will get to them, and you can send them in at wrong place. AskDroneU.com. I'm used to Paul doing that. That's funny, or at least being here with me. I'm just not myself. Anyways, AskDroneU.com, guys. Go there, give us your questions, give us those really cool accents. We love those, and we look forward to hearing from you. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Tag us on Instagram. We love sharing your stuff. It's one of the most fun things that we do, and there's some amazing stuff that you guys share that we like to pass on. So keep those coming, and we'll make sure we share those. All right, guys, without further ado, Jon and Paul.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm here with Jon Rupprecht. You know him as the drone lawyer. We know him as the rapper. That's why we call him J-Rep. But we're here because he answers our legal questions. Jon, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you?
Doing well. How are you guys doing?
Oh, very good. As you know, very busy. I'm a little tired today, but you know what? It is a great day, another day in paradise. So, Jon, today we're going to talk about a couple things just real quick so everyone knows what we're about to get into. We're going to talk a little bit about a 107 update and find out also maybe a little update on the Jon Taylor case. I'd also like to talk about, vetting 333 pilots. I know this is something that you talked about at AUVSI. And lastly, I would like to talk about what you saw at AUVSI. So maybe some themes, maybe some new information, maybe some really hurtful things that Michael Huerta said to you that made you not feel well. I don't know what it is, but I want to talk about it. So anyway, Bud, thank you again for being on the show. Where do you want to get started?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we can discuss 107, currently what is going on there. So in the overall process, the FAA has to get it internally approved, then it submits it to the Department of Transportation, they sign off, then the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, which is a smaller agency department inside the Office of Management and Budget, they have to sign off on it. Well, the FAA did that back prior to February 2015, then they published the proposed rules. Okay, then we all commented on it. Then the FAA has been digesting those rules. Those comments on the rules. Then the FAA has, as of March, I think it was the 18th of March 18th, they submitted it to the Department of Transportation. They signed off on it, and then as of April the 20th, the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs has it, and they are currently reviewing it at the moment. And so the FAA is saying that they're trying to get this out by June the 21st. That's their time to. That's what they're putting it out as. Now, OIRA has 90 days to either accept it or reject it. And in the past, prior to 2015, the proposed rules had ping-ponged back and forth between OIRA and the FAA. So if OIRA doesn't like it, and that's a completely separate agency from the FAA, if they say, we don't like this, do it again, or change something, then they kick it back to the FAA. FAA has to change it. And they're doing this based upon what's called a stakeholder analysis. They're going to talk to people in the industry, get their consensus on what they think about about the regulations. And they're also going to do a regulatory flexibility analysis. And then let's say the FAA, I mean, not the FAA, but the OIRA does give the thumbs up and does have the regulatory flexibility analysis and all that. They're going to have to notify Congress. Then they're going to publish the final rule. And then it's going to go into effect 60 days later because it's considered a significant rulemaking. Now, what's the interesting question there is, hypothetically, let's assume June 21st is the date that it does come out. Okay, I'm not even talking about if it's legal or not because, we saw what happened with this whole Part 48 thing, and they just rammed it through. If they do it on June the 21st, it's going to go into effect 60 days later. One good question is, does the
So we're not going to see it.
Huh?
So let me just clarify something really quick. So if it goes through OIRA, they say yes, thumbs up, which, by the way, I think of like the Gladiator scene where he's getting the thumbs up or the thumbs down and it's completely subjective. Anyway, not going into that one. But so if it goes to OIRA and they say yes, then June 21st plus 60 days. But if OIRA says no, June 21st is out.
Right.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden now I feel like the Drone U motto should be like, we who are about to fly salute you. Anyways, anyways, moving on. So OIRA is, thumbs up or
this
thumbs
could be
down.
a great YouTube video.
So let's say they do thumbs up it. Okay, well, the good question is whether or not you have a test that actually you can take at a CAT center. Currently, there's 696 testing centers in the whole entire world.
That is a very good point because those 600 testing centers have gotten 400,000 pilots through in the last 50 years, and now there are more registered drone pilots than real pilots. And how are those 600 CAT centers going to actually process 500,000 people in a short time frame? That's my question. It's something I've brought up before, and everyone's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. It's like, guys, this is a real problem. And people are saying, oh, I'm gonna be fine, I'm gonna wait for 107, it's gonna be here in June, and I'm gonna be ready to rock by July. I just don't see that. I mean, even if it comes out on the 21st, like we just said, with the 60 days, and then the CAT Center issue, and then what about, if you're taking any sort of practical test, who's delivering that? So lots of questions here, John.
Right. Well, so I started asking these questions last week and started running the calculations, just rough numbers. So generally for a block, for the test, you're gonna block off about 2 hours. Generally, when you do a knowledge exam, most testing centers have 2 or more computers, so you could typically crank out a total of around 8 people, assuming everyone shows up, and passes it on the first shot. You could crank out about 8 people per day. So 8 times 696, and you have 5 days a week. You can see that there will be an okay amount of people,
if you're very adamant and diligent about getting into the CAT Center.
I mean, I threw out a rough number. I was like, well, if you could do 48, I think it was like 48 a week times 696 centers, you could roughly crank out around 31,488 a week, roughly. So there's going to be some ability to do it. Now, keep in mind that the CATS testing centers and the laser grade ones are also doing tests for other type of people that have to be licensed elsewhere,
PPC,
like culinary,
hot air balloon, lots of stuff.
Wait, but not even aviation related. It's just there's other types of industries that use those same computers, by the way. Okay, so that's a whole interesting factor there, because it's not like it's completely only aviation. There are other industries that do use it. I remember when I was going through doing my pilot training, I took one of the knowledge exams, and the other one person in the room with me was going for like some culinary licensing or something test. I was just like,
take this test over here and you can cook eggs. Take this test over here and you can fly a 10,000-pound aircraft.
Right. I was just kind of like listening. I was like, oh, interesting. I'm like, I didn't know you guys took this as well. Use these computers. So that was years ago. But so there's some problems there. My concern is not so much for people going to these testing centers, because I think people will probably be able to do that pretty quickly. There's a pretty good amount of infrastructure there. I think the big problem is the TSA background checks that's going to have to happen on everybody. So you have the pilots that are already out there. They're currently getting TSA background checked. And if you still have your pilot's license, then you apparently haven't been a bad boy. If you saw right after 2001, there were some guys that got the TSA, revoked their pilot's licenses after all of that. And there were some lawsuits that went on. And so they regularly check these things to make sure you're not doing something with terrorist activity or whatever. So you have the already large pool of pilots having to be checked. Then you're going to have this influx. I don't even know what the number we're going to even throw at that. How many people are going to want to try to do that? That's going to be pretty substantial. And so the TSA is going to have to be able to gobble all of that up. Mm-hmm. How quickly is that going to happen? And so let's say the exam came out on when the proposed rules came out. Okay, so June 21st. You're looking at around August the 21st to where, like, okay, let's say June 21st, you take, like, literally run across the street, take the test, pass it, like, without even studying because you knew the stuff.
You probably could, frankly, but yeah. Anyway.
But, maybe, I don't know. I mean, if you're a private pilot, and a lot of, if you're a pilot,
that's what I'm saying. Like,
if
you're a pilot and you know the questions about airspace and how to calculate navigation and how to know where to fly and where you can't fly and how to read a chart. I think with that information and basic multi-rotor information, I think the average person could pass it if they were well versed in that information.
Right. Well, I always wondered what happens if you took it and you didn't pass it the first time. I was wondering about that because if you take a knowledge exam and you don't pass it, you actually have to go back over the deficient areas with a flight instructor. I was always like,
that would be
happens?
Awkward.
Well, yeah, and then there's no flight instructors that, like, I don't even know how that'll work. But that's a problem for the people that got goofed up.
All right. So long story short, 107 is not in the bag as everyone thinks it is. And I mean, do you think 107 is going to be what we saw and read last year? I mean, do you think there could be any potential changes?
Oh, I think there are some changes that have happened to 107. And primarily the best way to try to figure out where those lines would be drawn is look over at the micro arc that was recently done and see, like, well, what was the purpose behind the micro arc? And they were saying, well, it's to allow drones to fly over people. But then if you look at all the four categories, only two of them can fly over people. One just briefly kind of transitioning over people, and the other one can, like, kind of loiter over people. The other two cannot. And if you kind of read at that and look at that, you kind of have to see, well, that's going to have to buttress up against the 107. So how does that make sense? Since when you look at 107, there's nothing regarding flying near people mentioned in there. It just says you can't fly over people.
John, you're giving credit and assumptions to think that this agency creates rational decisions.
I would say that the FAA doesn't do things for no reason. Okay, they do everything for a reason.
But like you said earlier, I think that we've seen a kind of a shift in the last couple of years of the FAA doing things by the book, and then in the last kind of year and a half, it's been like, it reminds me of that meme where everyone throws everything up in the air on Friday and says, F this. And then on Monday, they're picking up the papers like, oh, I need that. So, I mean, that's like what I think of.
That's somewhat, yeah, it's kind of like, oh, I wish we did that. So, but I think that's going to have to butt up against the 107, and that's going to have to interact. Because if 107 says you can only operate, there's no prohibition in it with operating near people, but there's only a prohibition operating over people, well, there's going to be an issue there regarding how that interacts with the micro rule, because the micro rule seems to indicate that there's going to be a classification of aircraft operating near and away from people and then operating over people. So everyone basically try to figure out why they're doing that. And so that's just looking at that tells you that there's going to be something in 107 that's going to have to work with the micro rule, or unless they include the micro rule in the NPRM, and if they were to do such, they'd have to submit what's called a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking, which would be interesting because if they actually do that, they try to do a micro rule into 107, that'll kick the can down the road potentially much farther, and because they have to get more comments, right? Because it's not in the original NPRM, the micro rule wasn't in there. They even though they ask for solicitations on what people would think about that, so. That there's some issues there going on, but even if 107 comes out June the 21st, you have 60 days before it goes into effect. Well, how long is it going to take you to take that test? Do you take that test June the 21st or 22nd? If you did that, how long is it going to take you to pass a background check? Because you have to actually have the pilot certificate back in your hand. It's not like you just pass this test and you can run around. You're going to have to mail it off with an 8710, and then you're going to actually have to get PSA background check. They're going to mail it back to you. That's going to take a while. I estimate around 7 to 10 weeks from start to finish. So, I mean, you're running numbers around August the 21st to October the 21st, depending on when the test actually comes out. And then there's a backlog of people. So there might be some interesting there's going to be an interesting transition period here where people are going to be trying to jump into the 107, and there's going to be more and more backlog problems, and it'll be beneficial to have a 333 that you can in the alternative operate under. And especially if you have a pilot license and you already have a TSA background check, then that's a possibility that could allow you to then not need a TSA background check, and then you could just potentially operate in a much quicker fashion, possibly go into your local FSDO and getting a temporary pilot certificate issued by them or something like that.
I will say this. My flight instructor from up north inputted, you said the 8711, right?
8710.
8710. For the new pilot certificate, the way that they changed to April 1st, he inputted somebody on April 1st, and that person was done, had their paperwork back in 12 days. So that gives me hope that, and I've said this before, one thing the FAA does have down is their systems. Once they get the system going, they're very good about maintaining the system. So FAA, I'm saying it again, good job. Once you get your systems going, they actually work. But we got to get the system going, and we're still not there. And I think, John, you can see my frustrations because before we went live, I was telling you about my recent excursions to Mexico and just how there are phantoms over commercial real estate, over commercial construction, over residential construction, inspecting cell phone towers, looking at power lines, measuring conservation efforts in forests. I've never seen so many drones in the sky, ever. And it was weird to go to a country that's less developed than the United States of America, a country that some Americans would say is subpar to America. And I don't agree with that, but I've heard that. And people say that they're not as far along as America is technologically. But I think if the regulators in D.C., if the congressmen and women, the senators, the president, and anyone in the FAA who did not have their blinders on were to go to some of these second and third world countries and see how they're using drones to create more efficient workflows and systems across industries, you would have a visual representation of just how far behind we are. Because in America, I feel like so many people have lost sight because we've been fighting and bickering over regulations and 107 and SPRM 107 and NPRM 107 and the micro arc and all this. It's like we're losing so much ground. It is not funny. And I want to ask this question, John. At what point is the FAA violating the Sherman Act? At what point are they violating, and I'm specifically talking to when agencies, bureaucracies get in the way of economic development in either in the form of monopoly, or I believe the technical term is form a committee to inhibit economic growth. When is someone going to press the FAA and say, you're violating national law, the Sherman Act, antitrust law, because of your inability to act? And I say that because I want people to be thinking this. I want people to be asking that question because I don't have the power to go to D.C., even though that's where I'm from, to go to D.C. and tell my local congressman and woman, can you go slap Huerta in the face and be like, get it done? tired of waiting, with the old redneck accent. I feel like that would add a little nice little kick to it too. But I mean, really, we are so far behind. It's disgusting. And I'm sorry to vent my frustrations to you. But I feel that many people feel this way. And I feel that, moving into kind of the theme of AUVSI, one of the things that I've heard from AUVSI is that many 333 operators are having an extremely difficult time getting work because the bar was set so high with getting your pilot's license, 333, just like you say in your book, defining a policy statement and how that's different from, a law, which I really love. And by the way, I put it in my book. I had to quote you in my book, John.
Awesome.
But because I couldn't get you on the phone for 5 hours to talk about all these things. But anyway, I really just, we need to make progress and we need to make significant progress quickly because it's getting to the point where, it's affecting even the people who are attempting to operate within the constraints of the FAA. And something else I read, it was in AOPA, and by the way, I joined AOPA as a member. No one noticed it, and I thought it was really funny, but all the International Drone Days said AMA, and I went into Photoshop, and I took that out, and I put AOPA, because AOPA's actually done things for pilots. Anyway, don't need to go there. But I know I'm like all these little underlying things that I'm saying right now. But where was I going with all this, John? I just, it's hurting legal operators. It's hurting people who want to fly drones. Nothing makes sense right now. I like your article where 99% of all drone operators are operating illegally if drones are defined as aircraft. I love that. It's true. It's like, when are things going to change? When are we going to see executive, not responsibility, but executive pursuit? Because this article from AOPA, I know I'm going all over the place, John, I'm sorry. I've got ADD like crazy. The AOPA article said 6 out of 7 people who apply for a 333 by the time they acquire the 333 have actually given up on the process and they no longer wish to pursue the business. I mean, doesn't that say something about the regulatory state of affairs?
I would say it would do more to. I think there should have been a better gatekeeping function on the 333s as opposed to everyone and their dog, basically like monkey see, monkey do, copy paste. So gums it up for everybody because someone on a lark wanted to like basically goof off and do something. And I don't know how many times I've seen people on Facebook going, "Oh my gosh, I just got my 333, and it says I have to have a pilot's license." I'm like, hey, well, thanks for ruining it for everyone behind you in line that did get their pilot's license. So why did you bother to waste taxpayer dollars and make everybody wait? So, I mean, if you're not serious about it, don't do it. Seriously, like, don't. It's really annoying. Everybody's jumping in, not even knowing what they're doing. And it's because the FAA has created the bar pretty low with the 333s and publishing them online. And so there is it's a very easy barrier to entry to stumble into it, but then most people that stumble into it have absolutely no clue anything, what it even means with aviation or any of that, and then they fumble around and then run around on Facebook asking the most basic of questions that any pilot would know, and so then they get on these groups and they complain and it festers more and more, and I'm like, well, I don't really think you guys were that serious to begin with. You just kind of like floundered around thinking that the FAA was going to do this whole thing for you. And that's pretty much been my observation. About 90%, I would say, of everyone out there is not compliant. And many people are going and getting these pilot's licenses going, well, I get the 333 and hopefully that'll get the FAA off my back. It's like a 333 is not going to get the FAA off your back, really. I mean,
the only thing that's going to get the FAA off your back is a very candid conversation, and frankly, all that's going to do is put you deeper in the hole. It's the prisoner's dilemma, John. It's something that you learn in college, the prisoner's dilemma. Either I can help the other prisoner escape and we both win, or if I screw him over, we both lose. I mean, it really is the prisoner's dilemma here, because you want to make friends with some FAA guys, and you want them to know that, sir, you're focused on safety, right? You don't want people, to get hurt. You want to make sure that we're not flying close to people, that we're not doing stupid things, that we're not flying when there's extreme magnetic interference. But that's not what it's about. It's about, did you take money for that? Because if you took money for that, we're going to have a problem. But if you flew that and had no intention of selling it, and then later you sold it, well, that's okay. You know, it makes no sense at all. It's like arguing with a 3-year-old. It just doesn't work.
Well, yeah, there's some interesting conversations we can have about the incongruity there of how they go after the commercial guys, and then the recreational guys, they pretty much give them a pass to do a whole lot of things. But going back to the 333 point, one of the points I made in the that presentation I did on vetting drone operators is that really the 333 is it's a set of safety standards the FAA has developed. Now, while many people would agree that it is overkill on many points, especially the 500-foot bubble rule and the pilot license requirement, there's still safety standards. So, for instance, let's say the Enrique Iglesias incident, which happened in Mexico, happened here in U.S. And if Paul was the operator, right, who flew the drone, and then Enrique got his thumb chopped up by Paul, well, then it would be pretty easy for me as an attorney to then I would sue the actual event manager who put on the whole event. Okay, if I was Enrique's attorney, and then I would say, like, you should have done some better vetting of the drone operators. I would then go after the actual 333 drone operator and be like, hey, Paul, where's your 333? Where's the 500-foot bubble rule? You just flew right into this guy's bubble. Was he consenting? Did he fully know what was going on there? Do you have a pilot's license? Do you this? Do you that? And then you as an individual pilot, I would go after you as well. And then you can nail multiple people. So when the larger companies are looking at the 333 operators, one of the things they're keeping in the back of the mind is that if they hire a 333 operator who's not 100% compliant, then they open themselves up to a negligent hiring lawsuit. Hey, did you check out his 333? Did you check out his pilot's license? Just the basics you would kind of normally do if you were hiring like an electrician or plumber. Are they licensed, bonded? Those type of things.
Well, you bring up a good point, because I see where the lawsuit can come in. I see the fact that, someone could come after you for hiring a pilot negligently. But I think one of the major points that a lot of people haven't realized or thought about is that we in America have not had a significant liability lawsuit, a significant loss with insurance, a significant crash, a significant situation where someone has had to use their insurance, and to see how this situation would play out as the lawsuit, as you're saying in your example. So I think we totally could see this. At the same time, I think the reason that we haven't seen it yet is simply because it hasn't happened. There hasn't been a major loss yet.
Right. Also, going back to people talking about that they can't find work. Well, I would ask, how many of those people that can't find work actually have pilot's licenses? Okay, because there's some issues there that some of the companies that are doing hiring are getting more sophisticated. Their attorneys or whoever's actually hiring the drone operators are starting to ask more questions. Where's your 333? Do you have a pilot's license? They're starting to do that. And in such, a lot of these individuals who do have 333s are really not compliant with all of them. So that would be the better question to ask, is how many of them have 333s, pilot's licenses with registered aircraft, and have $1 million of liability on insurance, on their bird. What's that number, not the everyone with the 333, because people are getting sophisticated and they're starting to ask questions because they don't want to potentially open their large company up to a lawsuit. Because at the end of the day, like if I was a personal injury lawyer and my client Enrique was hurt, I mean, really, who cares about the drone operator or the actual pilot? Most drone operators and pilots don't have that much money.
And see, that's the next that's the next question, is what if they are legit? What if they have all those things? In America, I think the person's still getting sued no matter what, even if they were legit or not legit. I just think the depth of your fines is going to be determined on in society's eyes. Were you following safety guidelines, or were you negligent, just like you said? And it's pretty easy to prove negligence, which is what the personal injury attorney would be trying to do. So anyway, AUVSI, you made this talk at AUVSI. You made this talk. I really am tired. You spoke at AUVSI about vetting 333 pilots, and what other things did you see at AUVSI? When you came away from AUVSI, what were some major points that you saw, you want to talk about, you want to get out to the world?
Sure, yeah. The quick point of clarification is I actually did the vetting one at the Silicon Valley Drone Expo. The AUVSI one was about a week later. I did another presentation there.
Gotcha.
But at AUVSI, what I noticed was, the three things would be that there was there was more of a maturing of the industry. We had a lot more insurance guys there and a lot more attorneys there, as opposed to basically 2-3 years ago where there wasn't as many people. So there's more of a need for that. A lot of people are coming in, which is helpful. I would also say that another thing I noticed was the lack of clarity in how people are making their business decisions based upon their understanding of the regulatory environment.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
So you're playing soccer. What do? You learn the rules of the game, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the drone world,
so are you saying
nobody's doing that.
So you saying a lot of people are just running and gunning, like really can't talk today, running and gunning. They've got their 6-shooter on their side, and they're just blazing their own trail.
Well, this is here's a perfect example. Let's say you make drones, and you're like, hey, I can make this great fixed wing, beyond visual line of sight type of aircraft, and it'll fly, 100 miles, blah, 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 blah. You go to AUVSI. Well, now you start trying to sell it, and you start realizing, interesting, all these like civil operators really aren't interested in what I'm doing. Oh, that's because the rules of the game are different for them as opposed to the public aircraft operators. So who would buy your aircraft? It would be primarily only public aircraft operators, because they could try to get a public COA to do beyond visual line of sight using your aircraft. So you've automatically limited your market, and you've gone into an area that's very heavily restricted right now. And so do you as a company have the bandwidth to actually meet the needs of these larger agencies and stuff like that? They're going to figure that out and realize, like, well, you're just a startup kind of company that you don't really have a really good bandwidth here. You're not going to be a good match for us. We're going to go back and deal with the larger DoD, Department of Defense type of contractors, in situ or aero environment, because they have the bandwidth and the support to actually meet our needs. And so just seeing how that's all getting played out, kind of, companies need to really figure out what they're doing by actually just talking to someone in the industry, because some of their plans are not that wise. So, for instance, if they try to sell that drone to me and I want to do beyond visual line of sight, I have a bunch of headaches I have to go through to try to get that certified. So I'm going to have to do a special airworthiness certificate in the experimental category, which is only limited to certain type of operations. I'm going to then also have to figure out how in the world I'm going to get that thing BVLOS. What's my range on that thing? And in doing such, what frequencies am I operating on? 2.4 or 5.8? Okay, and in doing such, how does that work with the current FCC spectrum and everything with the certification of that equipment under Part 15? How does that all tie in? Okay, great. We do digital spread spectrum, so we can get up to a watt. We can get that going out a lot farther. But then how is that going to work with switching out an antenna? So now we have a helical antenna for long range. Well, that's definitely going to be non-Part 15 unless we try to get it certified. And that's all going to have to be coordinated with the FAA as well. They're not going to certify something that is illegal under FCC law. And that would all have to be done under for me as a civil entity. And a lot of these problems aren't going to be they're not going to be as much of a problem if I were to go into the public COA sector, because the rules are different for them in how they actually have to follow the federal aviation regulations. So, that's just a quick example there, but I just was walking around like, wow, that aircraft's never going to be sold to a civilian. That aircraft right there is not going to be sold to a civilian. That aircraft right there, small booth, they look like they're starting up. I would not go with them if I were a large agency, because they don't have the bandwidth. I'm going to hang out with the big booth over there in situ or air environment, or somebody that has, the bandwidth, the capability to train my guys with the infrastructure. And so that would probably be one big takeaway is, if you're going to play in this realm, know the rules of that are being played with. Know the rules. Yeah. Not just run around on Facebook or whatever, and don't deal with just any aviation people. Okay, I'm a pilot. I'm an F-16 fighter. I don't know how many people I've seen with some serious street cred in the manned aviation community come over to the unmanned aviation.
It means
area.
nothing.
And,
It means
and I'm
nothing.
like, they are like, and
It
they're
means
clueless.
nothing.
There was one guy who was touting himself as being so awesome. He had like 4 exemptions. And he was like this F-15 fighter pilot. And one of my friends called me up and was like, "Hey, is there something going on here?" I pulled all his exemptions and read them. The dude did nothing but file the same exemption pretty much 4 different times, adding on an extra 1 or 2 aircraft each successive time because he didn't properly think this whole thing out, wasted taxpayer dollars, and now was running around saying, "Oh, I have 4 exemptions," like he's awesome. You have 4 exemptions because you didn't do it right. It's like a monument to your ignorance. Anyways,
Yeah.
so
no, there's a local guy here who does a lot of the movie industry stuff, and it's actually that industry that I want to go into once all of our stuff is done. But he's the same guy. He's an old fighter pilot. He's super hardcore cronies with the local FAA guys. In fact, I think they break multiple laws by going out to lunch and having the conversations that they do, because I kind of sat in on one just to hear what they were talking about, and it was very interesting. But the funny thing is, he's a terrible pilot for unmanned stuff. So if you're one of those guys out there that's like, "Oh, I flew F-35s and I'm awesome," that is awesome. That is very cool. But it means
I've never
nothing.
met an F-35 guy. I've only met the 22s, but the F-35s, there are not too many of them out there.
No, there's a couple here at Kirtland, but and I've never met a guy like that. In fact, the coolest people that I've ever met are the Osprey pilots, or Osprey, whatever you want to call them, Osprey. In fact, I've trained a couple of them myself to fly drones. Most humble, amazing, willing to learn, like incredible leaders.
Now that's a multi-rotor. I'll tell you that. I'm like, that's a multi-rotor.
Yeah, that transitions over, but
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the helicopter guys have some principles that definitely, that they can understand. Manned aviation, not as much. I mean, they have a lot, but the aerodynamics for a helicopter
totally different.
Are a little bit more applicable, so they understand, application for the phantoms and all of that. So just going back to the AUVSI, it seems like a much more maturing part. The industry's maturing. At the same time, there are people running in trying to sell products, and they don't really understand what they're doing. And if you're a civil guy trying to figure out how to meet your goals, like seriously, get in touch with someone who's not. You don't have to do it with me. Just get in touch with somebody. Background check everybody. Just like do a Google search. Find out what they've done in the area to actually kind of have the street cred when talking about this area in an authoritative manner. I don't know. I had an email just the other day from a guy. Hey, I just talked to an aviation attorney. He told me I didn't need to have a biannual flight review. I'm like, okay. Why don't you read Restriction 3, which says right then and there clearly you need to have a biannual flight review. That's clue for this attorney that he talked to and this other aviation pilot that has years of experience have no stinking clue at what they're doing if they haven't even read what's the basic, the restrictions in the 333. I've kept track of a lot of the 333s filed by law firms, and there is probably only about 10 law firms that are serious players in this area. The large majority of them are posers. The large majority of law firms are posers. They've done very few 333s. I mean, the major ones I can tell you right now. I mean, my firm, of course. I was actually ranked second back in December. Denton's was number 1. I was second. There was also Enrico Drone Law Pro. We had Antonelli, Buchalter Nemmer over in Southern California. We had Frost Todd Brown over in Nashville. It's done a few.
Todd Brown, that's the company that's working with David Boggs on shooting the drone out of the sky, right? Is that the same?
Yeah, that's James. Yeah, okay, I'm friends with James, and so he's done. I think he's probably up to 8 or so, or 9 or something exemptions he's done. He's been. James's background is he was a Black Hawk pilot with the 101. And so he and I have done a lot of chatting and stuff back and forth, but I would just say there's only a real handful of true players in the industry of the law firms that have done the 333. So definitely ask questions why you think that you should hire them, and not even just for the 333 thing.
John, they know to hire you. It's okay.
No, I mean just anybody ask questions. I'm just saying. I'm just so frustrated that people go to people and then stuff gets botched up, and then people come to me and I have to do the cleanup.
You can't tell me that's surprising, though. You can't tell me that's surprising. All right, last point. Let's wrap it up here. You're really working as, how do I say this? The main driver on the train for the John Taylor case. Any updates? Anything at all? Who's helping you? Who's not helping you? I mean, I feel like nothing's happening and everyone is waiting for this to happen. So any updates for us, John?
Yes, there has been something that has happened.
Oh, man. All right, I'm ready. Go.
You ready for it?
Yeah.
Okay. We filed a motion for a summary disposition, which basically
That
it's
was like 6 weeks ago, though, right?
Yeah, it was like 7 weeks, I think almost 8 weeks ago, I think, as of this week. And so it was like, it's basically, judge, throw this out. There's really nothing here we need to discuss because it's so simple. Let's just get rid of it right now. Cut to the chase, get rid of it, judge. And because there's 3 cases, we were just filing a motion for summary disposition on the Part 48 part. And just a word of heads up for everybody. There was a news article that was published and went around the internet for a little while saying that the Taylor case was actually dismissed. That is completely wrong. That guy doesn't know how to read. That's probably the best way to put that.
Dude, there's more wrong information on the internet than there is right. And I think that's why people come here to Drone U, because we go to people like you, ask the tough questions, and get the right answers. And I think that's one of the real values of our podcast, because there's so much out there that's wrong, and that doesn't surprise me at all. So
right.
it wouldn't surprise me if someone said, the FAA is now allowing a blanket COA for anyone who wants to fly a drone anywhere except for 2 miles outside of any airport. Go free, birdies. Spread your wings. Let your peacock wings fly. It wouldn't surprise me.
I believe I can fly. Anyways, going back to, I just totally lost train of thought because you did your little flying thing like you're at the front of the Titanic, arms. Thank you. We're gonna lose the Taylor case all because of that image. So there was a really so that article came out, and the reason why they were confused was because Taylor, he's also an attorney, and he's a very smart man, very, very smart man. He filed 3 cases, and I've been helping him with that. There was also a public interest organization called Tech Freedom, which filed in. However, they had printer errors, so they filed in about 40 minutes after midnight, busting the deadline. So the Department of Justice filed a motion to dismiss. They voluntarily bowed out, saying, because they didn't want to look bad getting dismissed by the judge. So they bailed out. That's how the guy got confused, was because his case, the Tech Freedom guy's case, got consolidated into our 3 cases. So they basically lump all 4 cases into one because it's the underlying same issues pretty much in all 4 of them. Yeah. So they got dismissed voluntarily. We did not. That's how that whole confusion actually happened. So the case is still going on. We filed this motion for summary disposition, and the judge denied it. So what's happening now?
So you had an answer on that? We
finally got an answer on that point. So we're going to argue it all the way to full briefing. Our briefs are due, I believe, sometime in June. So that's the current status of everything. We did not lose anything. We just were filing a motion to quickly get rid of it. We lost. Well, now it's basically we're trying to get 2 bites at the apple. Beat them.
Are you trying to tell me that government doesn't make swift, smart, succinct decisions?
I'm it takes a while. So we're gonna have our briefs in sometime in, I believe, in June, and then the Department of Justice, I think theirs is in early August. Then the court is going to rule on it. And if you can just look at this basic motion for summary disposition, and that took about almost 2 months there, you can play that out and say, okay, early August, chuck on 2 months on that. We're looking at sometime October, November, December before we'd even hear a final answer on the John Taylor case.
Throw my headphones off and throw them at the camera. That's how I feel about that.
Okay.
No, I just want it to happen now. I think everyone wants it to happen now, and so many people, I'm sure, are listening to this in their car and just shaking their head right now like, gosh, this is never going to happen, because so many people do truly believe that the FAA's strategy on this entire thing is, we're not going to make the decision. We'll write the ground rules. We'll let the courts make the decision. And that's when we'll see the real enforcement's coming, because they've tried going to court and they've lost every time so far. So, I think that is their strategy, is let the courts figure it out. Because, I mean, in America, it seems like that's how most laws get truly tested for their longevity, is they go to the Supreme Court or they go to some higher court to be truly vetted. So anyway, Jon, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I know that I have been a little bit more emotional than normal. I've just been working so much, bud, but thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it.
Oh, Jon, you're an amazing addition to this community. Thank you for everything that you do. I don't want to ask you about the hard questions about your Taylor case, but I hope that some of the institutions that state that they are about pilots' rights and they are about the freedom of flight when it comes to drones are supporting you guys in that fight. So, awkward silence. All right, awesome. So, since none of them are, I will leave you guys on that bombshell. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today.
We believe that videos, images, words, and sounds have the absolute power to inform, inspire, and entertain. We reject indecision, confusion, and vanity, for they work against the community. We are united under the virtues of safety and knowledge. We are a training community of learners and teachers who encourage and energize each other to achieve greatness. We are pilots, videographers, photographers, freelancers, business owners, enthusiasts, experts, and apprentices. We are creators. We are the Drone U.